Also, another thing that's happening is girls will more quickly cry, and that behavior we'll think of as weaker, and that behavior also has a science base. So the science base of that is oxytocin. So oxytocin is the bonding chemical. It's like the primary human bonding chemical, oxytocin. If you don't have it, like they've taken oxytocin out of mother rats, female rats, and they can't bond. Got to have oxytocin. So it's the bonding chemical. So just like males have more testosterone, which is an aggression chemical, than females, females have more oxytocin than males. We both have each other's, but females have more oxytocin than males. So this has a profound effect on a number of things. And first, this. If you have a white matter brain and it processes and it figures out, it's not working, I need help, the I need help part is somewhat triggered by this chemistry, because that brain is also linked, right, to all these chemicals that says bond. If you're in any distress, bond. And it's called tend and befriend. Tend and befriend is now what the chemical is. Oxytocin, tend and befriend. So testosterone, fight or flight. Oxytocin, tend and befriend. And that's what these girls are doing. So it's also not that they're weak, it's very functional. They can't solve the situation with the assets they have. They're only 6 months old, so they verbalize or vocalize, and meanwhile they reach out to someone. And later, when they're 15, they're gonna talk. They're gonna text and talk, right? So that's oxytocin. And people will often wonder, okay, wow, girl drama, what we call relational aggression, girl drama, etc. What is that about? Well, I call that the dark side of oxytocin. So the light side of oxytocin, obviously, is that there's so much wonderful bonding that goes on among females, and that is often the envy of us males. If I got one or two good friends, I'm satisfied. I got my wife, I got my kids, I got a couple good friends, I'm good. But I look over here, my gosh, Gail could have, of course your personality matters too, by the way, your personality, genome, etc., extrovert, introvert. But Gail is not satisfied unless she has 10 people in her mind every day that she's thinking about, and I just exaggerated. But she's, she likes these friendships. She's like, oh, I'm gonna plan a dinner with so-and-so for next week. You're gonna be speaking down there. Oh yeah, I've got these ideas. So then she's like, tonight she's having dinner with these friends. That oxytocin is really strong. And that bonding chemical, when you think about girls, is really strong. So you notice girls will, now let's take 14 years old, will be in these dyads and triads, right? They connect up, dyads and triads, so 2s and 3s, maybe 4s, and they connect and they connect and they connect. So the bonding is great. They support each other, they're always texting, they're always inside each other's lives, they're doing each other's hair. Or the person here said painting the nails, someone said they're painting each other's nails, very sensorial, all this is going on. But then, one of them rolls her eyes at the, right? They say something and the eyes get rolled, and then what happens? It's over. It's over. So Davida, I have 2 daughters, Gabrielle and Davida, let's say. So I'll use Gabrielle. So Gabrielle had her friend Karen and her friend Rose, and they were close, buddy. They love each other, we're it, we're gonna be best friends for life. And then the eye roll happens, and then the next day everyone is weeping, and I exaggerate a little, she's laughing. Then Gabrielle is out, right? Gabrielle's out, and these other two are close, but Gabrielle's out. Or, because Gabrielle, she could be bad sometimes, she grabs Karen and they become friends, and this other one is out. Amy's out. We don't like Amy. Amy's terrible. Why don't you like Amy? Well, it was the tone of her voice, and she rolled her eyes at me, and she doesn't respect me, and wow, she's hits me for a half hour of all of Amy's sins. Okay, but what did Amy actually do? Well, the tone of her voice, and she, and then sometimes Amy does a bad thing, and especially with cyber, and fortunately you have a lot of really great talks that you're going to get this weekend, this week, on cyber. Well, what's going on in cyberspace, and so that adds a bad wrinkle to a lot of, can be positive but also negative. But just in terms of the dynamic, this is the dark side of oxytocin and the dark side of having such an active cingulate gyrus and the dark side of ruminating, right? However, I have a take on it I want to share with you, which is Just like I am begging us all to accept as normal, like between 10 and 20, that boys are going to whap each other, and that's actually love, and that they're exploring the self, and they're being experiential. And after our next break, I'm going to talk to you about aggression nurturance. I'm going to call that aggression nurturance. So just like I'm going to ask you to, if you're thinking in zero tolerance policies, to never think in them again, because between 10 and 20 especially, it's crucial that human beings are allowed to be affectionate and to be loving and to grow and to think and develop their social emotionals as much physically as inside their heads. By the same token, so I want us to allow boys to be more physical and not overreact to these guys. By the same token, I think we have to realize that girls are built to spend their years from 10 to 20 figuring this thing out. And that means they're going to make a lot of mistakes and they're going to feel hurt a lot. And what is it they're actually learning? They're actually learning boundaries. Because what happens is they merge, so their psyches merge, right? And that's what was happening when Gabrielle and Amy and Karen were such good friends. They had to text each other every 3 minutes, right? And if the other one didn't text, oh, why didn't she text me back, right? Because their psyches, their personalities have merged. Does that make sense? They've merged, like they are becoming one self. Right? Okay. However, can human beings exist merged? No. Even those of us who are married, or you're in a relationship, and I go back and I look 30 years ago. Okay, Gail and I, we merged, right? Back then, we did merge. It was all we were thinking about is like, I gotta have sex. I gotta have sex. This is the person for me my whole life. I love this person. I have to be together with this person all the time. So that was merging. That was merging. It's the first stage of love, merging. But then what has to happen relatively quickly if you're going to stay together? And anyone who's been through it's been through it, right? You can't stay merged. If you stay merged, what happens to you? You get lost, exactly. You don't have a self. And I can promise everybody, wearing my therapist hat, if you don't have a self, within a few years, you're not going to want to be in that relationship. Because to stay together, you can't be like this. You have to be like this. Right? You're companions, you love each other, we care deeply, etc. But we're not merged. We are two individuals who are independent when we need to be independent and who have formed a life together. And we have connected our souls. We are, let's say, soulmates, but from here. Well, how do you learn that? There's no one can teach you how to do that. We have to learn it experientially. So all our kids have to learn it experientially, just like we did, right? Just like all of us, male and female, can think back and go, wow, that really hurt when I was 15 and gave my heart to this person, and then this person just stomped it, right? And go, wow, that really hurt. Okay, well, that's part of what's going on. This is what these girls are doing to each other. So the part that is not dangerous is the part where they do this to each other, and they ostracize each other, and they roll their eyes, and then they overreact to rolling their eyes, and they have to go through the process of developing boundaries. Because by 20 or 22 or 23, whatever is their developmental trajectory, if these girls have not figured out how to have boundaries, they could be really miserable in later life. They would be miserable in the workplace. They would take everything personally, in the workplace that's said to them. Anyone who does anything in the workplace, that they'd ruminate about it, etc., because they really, they don't, all they do is merge. They want someone to really like them, and oh, did that person just said this thing. Well, that person may have had a bad day, right? But oh my gosh, it's all over, and etc. So they will have trouble in the workplace if they don't figure these boundaries out, and they will have trouble in marriage if they don't figure these boundaries out. They'll merge with this person, and then 5 or 10 years later, they'll have to separate because they got to have a self. So, a key word you'll hear from me on both boys and girls is danger. If these girls are not in danger, then I would love us to talk to them about what they're doing, but I would love us to feel a little bit of relief that actually it's pretty normal. It's pretty normal. It hurts, but it's pretty normal. And when we switch back to boys, you'll hear me saying the same thing about boys. If the boys are not in danger in their interactions with each other, then maybe we should not intervene. So let me teach a little piece of science here. What happens in the female brain when it gets under stress, and what happens in the male brain when it gets under stress? In the male brain, when it gets under stress, what chemical goes up? Testosterone goes up. When I get under stress, what happens is, for both of male and female, the cortisol level goes up, stress hormone, adrenaline goes up, right? And then it triggers separate cellular chemistry. For males, it triggers increase of testosterone. For females, it triggers increase of oxytocin. So for males, it's triggering a fight or flight chemical. For females, a tend and befriend chemical. So I think it's really great, if possible. I think nature is set up this way. If possible, it does not mean that this is not anything about gay marriage or anything like that. That's not the point. Two same-sex people can be great parents. So that's not about what I'm about to say. But in systems, we ought to have equal parts male and female, because the cellular chemistry is different. So we ought to give equal parts male and female in these systems to these kids. So when they would do that, Gail would immediately stop them out of her most protective instincts, which is great. I would not intervene, okay? But when I was alone with them and they would hit each other, my threshold for the pain is a lot higher. Like, they would just hit, and well, first of all, Davida would not hit back. So the first thing I said to Davida was, just hit her back, she'll stop. That was the first thing. Then she still was shy. She's 3 years younger. She thinks her older sister is the goddess, so she doesn't want to hit her back. So then, but gradually, and then they would be hitting each other, and I would just be driving along, and I'd turn up Led Zeppelin, and drive along, and they're hitting each other. And then at a certain point, when I thought they were in danger, then I would intervene, but generally they stopped before that. So over a period of years, they gradually moved experientially to where they really didn't need to punch each other in the arm, and they would talk more, or they would flick each other, or they would roll each other's eyes, and they moved to more complex strategies for their dominance behaviors, and et cetera. And now they're best friends. They're 26 and 23. They love each other. The point I'm making is not that we shouldn't protect girls and boys from bullying. We should. Absolutely, everyone will. But most of these interactions that our siblings are having, we have to educate both the teachers and the parents. That's why we want to talk to the parents too. Educate both sets, so both systems, that most of this behavior is experiential learning. So it's social emotional development. And it has to happen for kids to develop into mature adults. And the question we have to be asking ourselves, and the Ed Reform movement has to ask itself this, I believe, is this movement helping us raise mature adults, or is it helping us raise adults who will not mature until they're 30 or 32 or 35? And I think the latter. I think a lot of this stuff where we won't allow them to touch each other because it's unwanted touch, or because, et cetera. I think a lot of that, so some of it is protective, and it has to stay protective because bullying is very real. But I would say the majority of it is stopping maturation. So we're not actually allowing these kids to experientially grow. And remember that the brain grows experientially. It develops the pathways that it has to develop between the midbrain and the top of the brain experientially. Both boys and girls. Girls do it more verbally than boys, and girls do it more inside their brains than boys, because they have more going on in there, so they process more in there. But both males and females grow up because they're faced with experiences that challenge them, and they have to meet the challenge. And as they meet the challenge, they build these pathways between the midbrain and the upper brain. So we have to say two things at once. We have to say that everyone has to be protected, and if they're in danger, they have to be protected. But meanwhile, we parents can't have the unfair assessment of schools, which is that at school, kids should never do anything like they would do at home. So they can only do all these crazy things kids do with each other at home, but at school, somehow, kids should be perfect. And so should every parent, every teacher and every administrator. Everything should be perfect for these kids. But at home, they get to just go nuts. I would argue that that's not human nature. Human nature has to exist in both systems, so the school system has to be allowed to help these kids develop experientially. Like strategically, what it means is as these girls do these things, talking to these girls about it and explaining to them and saying, you know, do you realize you guys were merged when you just did this and now you're trying to develop a self? I would much rather that we had that conversation with these girls at school than you just did this really mean thing and that was bad and you're not allowed to do that. I think this conversation is a more mature conversation because it helps them develop a psyche.